velkommen til Mediapuls, programmet som tar pulsen på digitale og sosiale medier. Mitt navn Hans Petter Hansen, og jeg kan ikke...
Hans Petter Hansen?
Nei, vet du, jeg må ta den på nytt. Jeg heter Hans Petter Nygaard Hansen. Ok, den lov I stå.
Og der var du skilt. Lykke til med det. Og jeg heter altså Marius Karlsen fortsatt. Og velkommen til Sommerspesial. Og det fortsatt sommeren 2018, hvis du lurer det.
Vi tar sommerferie, men vi tar ikke helt sommerferie. Vi lar dere få tilgang til Mediapuls sitt univers bestående av rants og ros og gjester og annet godt snadder. Det ikke?
Rett og slett snadder, tror jeg stikkordet her. Ja, nei, men vi har gjort det har vært en utrolig fin sesong. Og
det har det.
Jeg vet ikke, tar vi med ting som utenfor sesongen også? Altså den første halvår, eller tar vi med mer enn første halvår? Aner ikke. Uansett, det blir god lytting, også sånn.
Vi sier ikke hva vi tar med, vi bare tar det med.
Ja, det som fint. Vi aner jo ikke, for vi har ikke bestemt det enda.
Så folkens, prepare to be surprised.
Tilbakeblikk med Mediapuls.
Vi har fått besøk av Mr. Content Marketing himself, eller da Lissom-journalistikken himself, Mr. Joe Pulizzi fra Content Marketing Institute, og han snakket jeg med her mandag da 9. januar, direkte fra Cleveland I Ohio. Det var jo for så vidt en av de statene som var med på at Donald Trump vant valget. Det jo en annen sak.
Men han var ikke med på det. På den podcasten der, men så det jo sånn her undertone av Hillary Clinton hele veien. Ja. Stikk til han, Trump.
Han skal ha skyld for mye, men ikke akkurat skyld for det. Temaet da content marketing, bedre kjent som innholdsmarkedsføring, som jeg også kalte det som Lissom-journalistikk. Det vel for så vidt ikke jeg som har hatt det som favorittbegrep, men det enkelte journalister som har hatt det. Jeg har vært en stor fan av Joe Pulizzi lenge. Jeg har vært heldig å møte han 2 ganger her I Norge, hvor han har vært gjesten til Ola Hanøs sine konferanser, som blant annet Epic Content Marketing, som for så vidt også arrangeres I april I år. Og I tillegg så forsøker jeg å holde meg veldig oppdatert på hva han holder på med. Jeg digger, og det sier jeg jo for så vidt også I samtale med han, jeg digger P&R, som da står for Pulizzi and Rose. Han har jo en makker som vi også har I hverandre, Robert Rose.
Og det også podcasten deres.
Det podcasten som han da kjører.
Og så de 2 bøkene også. Både Content Inc. som kom nå, var det forfjor. Og Epic Content Marketing som kom vel I 2013. Altså. Det absolutt verdt å lese.
Ja. Og har du ikke lest Joe Pulizzi sine bøker, har du ikke hørt på podcasten hans, så gjør du det, men altså ikke da før du har hørt samtalen vår med Joe Pulizzi. How would you define content marketing, and why are we still questioning if it's worthwhile investing in?
Well, first of all, it's about time you had me on your podcast. I've been writing, I've been sending letters, and then finally you have me on 2017. So this is going to be the best year of all. But thanks for having me on.
You must have the wrong email address.
something like that. We're going to continue to hear that. And it happens with everything. Everybody will say the same thing about social media. People still say things about advertising and how long has that been around? You just look at content marketing. It's been around for hundreds of years. Anyone in the industry has known that it started out in real loyalty, retention marketing. It's where print magazines are really born around customer communications. If we think about what the purpose of content marketing is, it's all about creating better customers. That's all we want to do, right? As marketers, we want to create better customers. We'd like them to buy more, to stay longer, to talk more favorably about our businesses in some way. So how do we do that? Well, the belief behind the approach of content marketing is if we deliver valuable, relevant, compelling information to them that's going to help them with their lives or their jobs or something else, that they're going to be more loyal to us. And that's why when Robert Rose and I, my podcast partner, which I know we'll talk about our podcast in a little bit, we always talk about this approach of building an audience. And of course, if you're in content marketing, you don't have to build an audience. You can create content and see all types of profitable behavior from that audience if you deliver content in a certain way. It doesn't have to be a loyal audience, but I believe that's the best way to look at it, because if that person starts to anticipate the content that you're sending them, because that content is so helpful to them in some way, they're going to be more likely to buy your products and services or do something, some kind of a profitable behavior. So that's sort of how we look at the approach of content marketing. And some people don't want to buy into that, and it's fine. I don't have a problem with it. My take in the press, when we see somebody, we've seen really smart people that have put out posts, and they've been doing it ever since. I've been in this industry for 20 years now, and I've seen, and it's just escalating. There's more and more. That's fine. You can have your beliefs. I just want people to be nice about it. I mean, you don't have to say that the industry that I'm in is just the worst thing ever and this is silly, when we have over 100 years of really good case studies. Even back to John Deere's The Furrow magazine, which I talk about all the time, which if you look at the history of John Deere, the agricultural manufacturer, the largest one in the world, and you look at how that company got started, if the Furrow magazine wasn't there delivered to their audience on a regular basis, I can't even tell you if John Deere's actually John Deere today.
Exactly.
That's just one small example. Is Red Bull today without Red Bull Media House? I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, nobody can. So it's just those types of things. And I don't have a problem if somebody says, look, I'm going to go and stay toward traditional marketing. That's fine. You can survive that way. But if the innovative companies, I think, are more bent toward content marketing today.
Do you think content marketing require a storyteller? Is it, is good content marketing good storytelling?
Well, it certainly helps. If the information that you're providing is not taking that person engaging in your content along some kind of a journey, and that's where the story comes in. You've got to take them from one place to another. You've got to get their imagination flowing. You've got to inspire them in some way. That's where storytelling comes in. So most really good content marketing programs or publishing programs and have really good storytellers, and even journalists. Some of the best journalists out there are really good at telling stories. So you could just verbatim say, okay, I'm telling you about this idea, this content niche in some way. It's not the greatest storytelling in the world, but it's information. You could do that. You see a lot of people do here's my customer question, I'm going to answer that. It's harder to do that today if you're just answering customer questions all the time, because there's so many people that have gone that direction because of search engine optimization. It's like, oh, hey, there's the customer question. That's the keyword. I'm going to answer that. I'm going to do that with my top 200 keywords, and great. Well, what stands apart? Stands apart is inspirational content, is moving content. It's content that's the whole thing about content marketing. For it to work, you have to see a behavior change. So that's when we talk about engagement and fluffy metrics and web traffic and shares, and those are all fine. And I guess they're on that engagement curve, but I really want to see engagement. I want to look at my reporting and say, look, at that person has opened my e-newsletter the last 8 times. They've gone to my website. They've gone to multiple content offerings. They've downloaded ebooks and webinars. And those are things that I can look at today, and I actually have that information. And I can say, wow, then they bought. Then they bought again. Then they did this. And we actually created a better customer from the content we delivered. We can actually see that today. That's the great thing about the times that we live in, because we can actually look at this stuff today.
But from the storytelling side, since you talked about moving people, engaging people, and I guess it's easier to move and engage and not to forget tell stories when there is a person behind it. But in terms of Red Bull, you don't see any people from Red Bull actually telling the story. You see their customers telling the story.
That's right.
Does it have to be, or should it have to be a customer that tells the story, or should it be a celebrity, or could it be just anyone?
Yes, the answer is yes. And if you kept naming people, I would say yes.
Yeah, exactly.
You've seen them all. Everyone, you have some programs that just are look at Indium manufacture from New York in the United States. All the engineers tell the stories. Great storytellers that engineers are. They are in charge of creating all the content for that content marketing program. So that's the employees that are doing that. In some cases, look at an American Express open forum. Most of those are freelancers, writers, or influencers that are creating that type of content. You mentioned Red Bull. I mean, they're getting outside experts and customers that are telling those stories. Yeah. Look at Content Marketing Institute. We have a mixture of all three. We have employees, we have freelancers, and we have customers. So it really depends on what makes the most sense. And when you put together your content marketing strategy, you start asking questions about, well, who can tell this story? Sometimes your customers can't tell this story. If they can, God bless you. That's that's wonderful. If you're in that position like a Red Bull can, and they can do that and they get customers to tell those stories, that's simply fantastic. Some of us have customers. It's just not going to happen. Or if you're looking at some top of the funnel type stuff, sometimes you can't get your customers to do that, where you're really thinking, we really need somebody that understands this industry, that's an expert, that's not a customer, then we will go out and hire that talent. I think that's fine. I think you just have to ask yourself, be honest, do we have people in our organization, or do we have customers that can tell this story? And if the answer is no or not yet, then what are we going to do? We're going to probably hire that talent.
Yeah. Would you say there is a difference, or should be a difference, between businesses doing business with other businesses towards, compared to B2C, or where the businesses do business with consumers? Because that tends to come up as a topic all the time, that it's easy to do content marketing towards end users, customers, but it's really hard when it comes to B2B, or businesses doing business with other businesses.
I think that's so. First of all, I don't see a.
It's a leading question.
It's still, they're human beings, and and your goal as an organization is going to be a little bit different depending on whether you're talking to a business human or a consumer human, but they're both humans. And basically the biggest difference is the buyer's journey is longer in B2B in general. But they're still human beings. So I don't think it makes a difference at all. It's more of a perception. Actually, if you want my take, I think it's easier to do business to business than business to consumer, because on business to business, I can target education, thought leadership. And maybe that's just me personally. I think it's easier to focus on education and training type concepts than to focus on, and a lot of the B2C side is around entertainment. You've got Red Bull. Look at the content that they send out. You've got some guy, doing a triple flip in the air with his bike, and it's amazing, and wow. And in B2B, I can talk about engineering concepts and talk about new ways to think about solving problems. Not that you can't do that in B2C, but it's more prevalent in B2B. And I think that's easier to do. So
yeah, but do you think it's easier because the competition is not as fierce as in B2C?
Oh, I think that's part of it. I mean, look at if you're going B2C, you're competing with the world. So you have to really focus on, okay, what is that little thing, that little niche that we're going to target? It's harder for consumer companies to do that because they're always about more. They're always about big campaigns, reaching as many people as possible. With B2B, I love, because you know what? I'll tell you this side story. When I was at Penton Media and we were in the content marketing department there, we worked with a technology client, and they were targeting 200 people. 200 people for the entire program. It was my favorite program of all time, because you know how targeted we could get with 200? We sent them, it was a combination of books and ebooks and newsletters, and it was beautiful. And we could orchestrate that better than anyone else, because we could target those 200 people better than anyone in the world. And you know what we found out? We only needed 2. They were purchasing multi-million-dollar packages. For the program to work, we needed 2. We got that, by the way. So, I mean, but those are the types of things that I love. If you're a B2C company and you're selling something that's, $10 US, it's hard to focus on 200 because it's not going to work. They want many more. B2B, you can make that work.
It sounds like, in terms of B2C or even B2B, I would say that there is a big challenge just trying to convince your customer that going niche and really going niche is better than going broad.
Well, yeah, I mean, in my take, in my experience in this industry, you go broad and you lose almost every time. Because if you go broad, just look at the competition that you're competing. I mean, just be smart about it. I mean, if you're in publishing, you don't want to be in a content area that has more than 3 major voices in it. if you're going to go broad, that means you're automatically saying there's 10, 20, 30, 50 different possible voices. Even let's just say you're creating content about content marketing. You just get really meta here. And you're just saying, oh, this is the 7 tips for success in content marketing. Well, you know how many sites could create that content? Thousands. That's why when we talk to we work with a lot of agencies, and they're explaining, oh, we want to target people around content marketing. Well, let's get very specific. Who are we talking to? What industry are we talking to? What specific part of content marketing are we talking about? Where can you be the leading expert in the world on something? That's what I want to focus on. That's where that story can really blossom. Because then we can get really excited about something the more niche that you go. So yes, it's difficult because if you're talking to a chief marketing officer, they want to target more people, or maybe it's more the director of content wants to target as many people as possible, but the chief marketing officer wants sales. They want to save costs or they want to drive sales, and you do that by getting super niche and focusing on those pain points better than anyone else in the world. And if you do that, you're going to see behavior change.
In Norway, there's a lot of content marketing discussions still going on, which basically include the publicist, where they tend to think that they own this market methodology, if you like. With just a few exceptions, they have established their own content marketing departments or even companies to offer advertisers content marketing and native advertising services as a new marketing tool. And at the same time, we see more and more advertisers or companies, if you like, within B2B and B2C investing in content on their own platforms. The publicist obviously has the brand, they have the readers or the viewers, and they also have the distribution, but in many cases not the personalized approach towards their audience. And the cost of doing content marketing and native advertising through publicists is really high in most cases. What would be your advice here? Own the creation and distribution, or go for the rented land approach, or both?
Well, like I've always said, that's a good setup, by the way. Like I've always said, it's not one or the other, I don't think. I mean, if you are in the discipline of marketing, not just content marketing, you're going to look at the best way to communicate with your customers. That's probably... You're looking at everything. You're looking at, I need to look at my public relations and how I deal with that with my publicists. I need to look at how I deal with search and social and traditional marketing and talking to my sales and the sales collateral. And you're looking at everything. And that's where I think a lot of, go back to the beginning of the podcast, we talk about a lot of these naysayers. They come out and say, well, advertising's not going away. No, it's not going away. It's not. We're not fighting a battle against advertising. Actually, content marketing can make your publicity and your advertising better. So, do I lean toward the content marketing side, the owning, let's say owning your platform versus renting that? Absolutely, because at some point I would like to rent to own. I would like to have control over. I can't have control over your audience, but more control over communicating with my audience instead of having that gateway. Now, if you don't have an audience, if you don't have an own audience right now, you have to leverage things like native advertising, like publicity, and do those things so that you have the opportunity to create an audience. You're not just going to start up shop tomorrow and say, hey, I'm going to here's what we're going to do. I'm going to create an audience. I put out my blog post on my website. I'm open for business. This is great. Well, you know what? You'll hear crickets. Nothing's going to happen because you've got to get people to that site. So as you're developing your own platform, you still want to do all the things that's going to get you out into the marketplace so people will actually consider going to your content, your own content. That's why what I didn't let's take native advertising for a second. Let's say that you're going to create an article and put it on a media company's site to try to get traffic or whatever your goal is. I never understood why somebody would do a native advertising program but not have an owned program going at the same time. Because my thought is you want to rent to own. You go ahead and do a native advertising program, you get them to go to your site, and you can actually convert them into an audience member that's then more likely to buy your products and services. That's the thinking. But the majority of that's why native advertising is hurting a little bit right now from getting them to re-up into native programs, because they're not getting they're basically doing advertising. They're taking 2, 3, 4 of these. They're not doing it enough. There's no calls to action going back to more content. They're trying to go from content to product. It's too quick. You can't make that conversion, and it's not working.
I guess in that respect, you have to make sure that the native advertising that you put into the media company actually has a landing page that you own yourself, so that you get the SEO juice and you get the possibility to actually create that additional campaign, right?
You need a conversion point that's not product related. And what I've seen in a lot of the native advertising programs here in the States is they'll do some native advertisement. They'll click over to some product offer, and that's way too quick. Somebody's not going to read an educational article, hopefully educational article, and say, "Oh, I'm going to buy a garage door now." I mean, they're not going to do that. You've got to get them into, "Oh, okay, well, that's an interesting take on that concept," and then you get them to click over for some white paper, some ebook, hopefully signing them up for your e-newsletter, or some permission, as Seth Godin would say, some permission to get for them to opt into your regular communications, so that you can go on and forward with that relationship. That's where I think the missing thing is. So basically, back to your initial question, it should start with both. You should never be asking yourself, do I do content marketing or advertising, or content marketing or publicity? Or you should never ask yourself that. What you want to do is say, who is my target audience? What are their needs? What are their wants? And how can I create a better customer from that? And then you look at all the things that we have in our marketing backpack at our disposal, and content marketing just happens to be one of those things.
Yeah, just one of them. I think that's a key element to the whole equation. Yeah,
you could be successful. There are companies out there that can be successful not doing content marketing. I just think that there's a majority of those companies out there right now, but small, innovative companies. I mean, a lot of the guerrilla tactics that are going on right now. Content marketing is maybe a better direction to lead with. Not that you wouldn't use advertising and publicity and all the other things to make that work as well.
It seems like there's a lot of challenge related to content marketing, that you don't immediately see the return of that investment, as opposed to do a quick push marketing campaign, whereas the sales management team would be able to see that it actually converts. You do the campaign on Thursday and it converts on Friday, and then you see the ROI immediately, which is not the case with content marketing. So it tends to be a challenge from the content producers to convince the people with the money that they should put their efforts into content marketing in a long-term perspective.
It's the biggest challenge the industry has, because the marketers, enterprises are impatient. I mean, most enterprises are living from quarter to quarter, if not month to month. And you're like looking at, what have you done for me lately? And generally, content marketing is an asset building program. It's built. If you're looking at creating better customers, that's a different way of thinking and a different approach, and it's approach for the long term. That's why it's very hard for public companies to really double down in this effort, because they're always looking at, I need the next quarterly return. You have to have somebody as a chief marketing officer saying, where are we going to be at in the next 2 years? Where's the marketplace going? Where are the new audiences going to be for our products and services? When you're thinking down the road like that, that's content marketing sweet spot. If you want to say, we want to be the leading provider of X, that's where content marketing comes in. Because you're not going to do that by, hey, I got to get this direct mail out on Thursday because we've got to hit sales by Monday. And if we don't if you're thinking that short term, don't even consider content marketing. Like, it's not going to work. It's not going to work at all for you, because what you're trying to do is build a loyal audience. And over a long term, you're trying to generate greater value from that one person. And if you take the short-term perspective, you just say, I want to get into their wallet as quickly as possible. Those are two very different ways to look at that. So if you're in it for the long term, if you want to be the leader in your industry, that takes a longer-term approach to it, not something that's going to fix overnight. So yes, absolutely. And that's when we go in, like when CMI, when we do an advisory and we'll go in and they're really short-term thinking, we absolutely tell them, just don't do it. Yeah, just don't do it. It's okay. You don't have to do it. You could still survive and do your short-term campaigns. And then when they're going in, they're doing content marketing and they have a 3 to 6 month timeline. If they don't see, major engagement figures by then, that they're going to stop doing it. I just say, don't even wait the 6 months. Just stop now. I could probably tell you're not going to get it. You have to take a timeline of probably 12 to 18 months to really see something that happened. And since we're so impatient today and we believe because we can see these the reports in front of us that will show us web traffic and shares and whatever, it's really killed us. And that's where there's a huge opportunity for those that are patient. So that's where, you sort of see these two camps, those that are looking at long-term and really building, better customer groupings. And then you have those that want more revenue tomorrow. So one of those camps should look at content marketing. One of those should not.
Are you telling this kind of message to the C-suite level of the organizations, or is it? Yeah,
absolutely.
You have to, I guess.
Absolutely. Is a couple months ago, I did a presentation for a group of global manufacturing CEOs, and I absolutely said, if you're looking at less than a year timeline for making a major impact, using some approach around content marketing, and it's less than a year, just don't do it. Just take the pressure off yourself. Just do the stuff you've always been doing. I can't say that would work. Things are changing left and right. Consumers are more in control of content than ever before. So I don't know how you're going to do with that, but I can tell you that it's probably not going to make an impact in less than a year. So, and that's the message that I think when we see the stories that talk about content marketing as failing or whatever, they always bring up these cases where somebody started something and they killed it in 6 months. And I'm like, well, you didn't give it a whether it was right or wrong, I don't know. I have to look at the strategy, but you didn't give it a chance. I mean, just look at your podcast, look at my podcast. I don't know about you, but in the first couple weeks wasn't great. took some time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's usually not an overnight success unless you have other audiences. If you already have a big audience, then you can launch a podcast. You can launch a video series because you already have the audience and they're interested. That's when CNN or New York Times or the Financial Times, they launch a new product, they immediately get some traction on that because they have an audience. So if you already have an audience, you can do some cool things like that and diversify. But if you don't, you got to put the work in, because New York Times took New York Times 150 years to get to this point. 100, no longer than that, 175 years, whatever it is. Financial Times, the same thing, patience.
I guess that's the hard part because most of the companies, at least in Norway, they don't have that big audience coming into their own platform. So they like to, piggyback on the established audience from the media companies or the publicists. But then again, they have a tendency to focus on the short-term campaign as opposed to the long-term building of that audience. I guess you call it the micro moments, which lasts throughout the whole year as opposed to just a short-term campaign. But what would you say are the biggest content marketing trends for 2017?
Well, the one that I've been talking about since it seems like forever, but now is finally coming to fruition, is you are starting to see companies of all sizes. And I remember when I did my presentation last year in Norway, I talked a little bit about this. And the feedback was, we're small companies, we can't afford to do this. And I'm like, these deals are happening in all sizes. And it's the idea of going out and buying small to medium sized media companies, blogger sites, and influencer sites. And over the last 6 months, we've really started to see that heat up. You've got companies like, global manufacturer Aero Electronics, one of the largest electronics manufacturers in the world. They purchased a number of media sites in the electronics industry. So what they're doing is they're launching, in some audiences, they're launching their own platforms. And in other ones, they're to get quicker to market, they're buying them from other media companies and other publishers. We're seeing actually on the podcast today where Wall Street Journal This was just announced the other day. Gary Vaynerchuk acquires women's publisher PureWow. So there's an agency that's Gary Vaynerchuk's agency, VaynerMedia, is publishing a women's media company. You're going to see that agencies are doing this, and you're going to see brands hopefully will do this, because to the point, let's say that. So this is one of the conversations I had with those CEOs. I'm like, well, if you are really impatient and you just want to see results right away, then I would go out and acquire an audience and give yourself a step up. As a publisher, so I've been in the publishing industry for 20 years, and as a publisher mentality, that's always the direction we would go in. Do we say, hey, do we go and create this? Do we start it from scratch? If we do, we know it's going to take us about 3 years to get some traction. That was about how we did 3-year plans, so we knew it took that kind of time to really build a quality audience of some substance. It took us about 3 years. Or we could go and we put a list together of the media sites, the blogger sites, the influencer sites that already had the audience that we wanted to target. Well, we would just go ahead and purchase, and we'd go ahead and say, well, could we purchase any of those as possibilities? So I think that's going to be the trend for 2017. I mean, Robert and I will most likely be talking about this on our podcast every week, because it seems like every week there's somebody buying another media company. And especially, I think, in Europe, I think this is going to happen because of that impatience. And the only thing that's stopping us is we're not thinking about it as marketers. We're not thinking it's an option. When I go and do this presentation to marketing and PR professionals, they're like, oh, I didn't know that we could do that. I didn't know that was a thing. I'm like, yeah, you could do this. You could absolutely buy it. So take some of that advertising budget and say, you know what, and some of these deals are 5 figures. They're not huge, because a lot of these bloggers are really good at building audiences and really bad at monetizing those audiences. So there's an opportunity right there. I think we'll see a lot of that in 2017.
We've seen some telecom companies in the US acquiring media companies. We haven't seen yet, I think, in Europe, at least not in Norway. And I think we will eventually, because there is a feeling, at least my feeling is that most companies that are not close enough to the audience, which I guess they have to be in terms of differentiating themselves, as opposed to most products now being more and more similar or equal. Do you foresee that the Verizons, the Telenors, the Telias of Norway and Europe is going to acquire some of the media companies, or even a small newspaper?
I think that's already on the table. I think those things are already happening. They just haven't announced yet. So I think it's just a matter of time. The telecom companies are the first one, because they're already in the media space. So it's an easier dive for them. You won't see the manufacturers, and you won't see we've seen it on the CPG side already. If you look at L'Oreal, they purchased makeup.com. That happened years ago. You'll see Procter & Gamble get into this a little bit, because they've got so many different audiences. And look at Casey Neistat, and the very popular YouTuber. CNN just purchased the rights for Casey to produce a new show. We'll see where that is. So that's almost like purchasing the influencer. You talk about storytelling before. Casey's a great storyteller. CNN said, we want to launch a new audience. Let's go ahead and do this with Casey. So there's an opportunity there. So yeah, I don't know how it's going to play out, but I see a lot of weird things happening in 2017 with those types of things.
It's going to be a fun year from a
It's going to be a super fun year. Yeah, because there's two things there's two variables, and that's why it's going to happen. One is, we talked about this impatience. It's rampant right now. And the other thing is, for the most part, most companies have a lot of cash in their coffers. They haven't invested that. They haven't put that to use in, let's say, the stock market or a heavy M&A to this point. But they have it. It looks like global environments are going to be steady, going to be okay for 17. No major incidents that we can see. They're going to start putting that money to work.
Nothing to do with content marketing, but any prediction for Twitter in 2017? Will it survive?
It'll definitely survive. I don't think there's any. Everybody talks about, is Twitter going to die? I don't think that there's any question about that. The tool is obviously valuable. The problem is that they They haven't been able. I mean, they're actually making decent. Or they can make decent money. The revenue's okay. They're just not growing at a Facebook type level. And people are like, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do?"
If Twitter is going out of business, I think Donald Trump is the man who's going to save it.
You know,
you don't have to comment on that.
I would actually. That was the one reason why I would like Twitter to actually close up shop. That would be great if Twitter just stopped and we wouldn't have to go through everything on Mr. Trump and see how his tweets go on. I mean, Robert Rose he's always been saying that Google's going to buy Twitter. I think that's a possibility. I don't know if anyone else. I mean, there was the rumors before that Salesforce was going to do it. I don't see that happening now. I actually think that you'll just see over the next year, Twitter will stay independent, and I think they'll just continue to refine their operations and look at different ways to monetize. They'll shore up their expenses and look to get profitable in 2018. And I think they're just going to continue to go independent and into 18, and everything's going to be fine.
Okay, let's hope that. And speaking of monetizing, and this is going to be the last question. I'm not going to hold you for any more now, but you have your own podcast, and for the audience, the Norwegian audience that don't know about this, PNR, which is the short for Pulizzi and Rose, right?
That's correct. Yep.
This Old Marketing, which is one of my favorite podcasts, of course.
Thank you. Of course, you have to say that.
I have to say that. I'm obliged to say that. But I assume that you define your podcast as content marketing. But where do you see podcasting going? As far as popularity is one thing, but even more importantly, when it comes to monetizing, because now it's, today we are celebrating 10 years since Apple and Steve Jobs launched the iPhone. Podcasting is even older than that, but Apple are still treating their podcast platform as something secondary. There's no possibility of monetizing from it. You have to put some commercial into it. You're not able to subscribe to it. Do you think Apple will do anything about a subscription or monetizing model to their podcasting platform in 2017?
Well, on the last question, I'll answer that first. Is I wouldn't count on Apple to do anything pro podcasting. Apple's out for Apple. Apple's going to do whatever they need to do to generate revenue and profits. And if that hurts the podcasters or helps them, we don't know to this point. I would like to see they're going to do things to help. But again, just like anything else, just like Facebook is not out to help us content creators, they're out to help themselves, as we all know. So we've just got to make sure we keep that in mind. Now, as for the type of content, as in audio, the audio form of digital audio is going to continue to increase because it's the one area that you can multitask. First of all, it's easily accessible, and it wasn't 10 years ago. It wasn't accessible. Now it is. Now everyone can get a podcast, audio programming if they want to. That's why audiobooks are on the rise. That's why podcasts are on the rise. Every year that you look at, if you look at Edison Research every year, and they look at their share of ear study, every time they do the study, there's more people listening to audio content. That will continue to happen. That's not going to change. So there's a huge opportunity there, where most of the problems occur with podcasting is because the podcasters aren't consistent and don't deliver to a longer period of time to actually gain an audience. I know a lot of podcasters that did their podcast for 3-4 months. They didn't see what they wanted to and they stopped. Well, yeah, that's just like every other. We just talked about campaigns. It's not going to work. It takes a longer time to build that audience. So I think that those that stick with it, that find a niche, can be very successful. What we've seen from PNR and This Old Marketing and our podcast is that it's much easier to first have your own platform, like we did. We already had a blog that was successful. We had I think it was like over 100,000 people in our audience before we launched the podcast. Then when you diversify, then you can pick off some of that audience. Whether do we call it content marketing or not, what we know is that our best customer for Content Marketing Institute is subscribed to at least 3 different things we do. So there's, let's say, to the blog, They get the newsletter. They're signed up for webinars. They're signed up to our print magazine, Chief Content Officer. They sign up to our podcast. So those are the types of data that we look at. And we know 3 is our magic number, because if you're signed up to 3, you're more likely to buy something from us. You're more likely to buy our training, to go to our big event, Content Marketing World, or some of our other events. So that's why the podcast is so important. Yes, do we make money directly off of the podcast because we have an advertising component? Sure we do. Absolutely we do. But if we didn't, it would still be valuable to do, because we know that subscription option is there, and we know that 3 is our magic number, and that's where data comes in. So, I'm so high on podcasting. I love it. But if I'm going to talk to somebody and say, if they say, should I launch a podcast? The answer is, I don't know. It's a difficult thing to just start with unless you have your own audience first. If you have your own audience first on another platform and then launch a podcast, it's much more likely to be successful faster. If you just go and you're going to hey, I'm going to launch and I'm going to use iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud, whatever, to distribute that, it's just tougher, because we can't distribute that direct. We can't distribute the MP3 directly to them. We have to go through some other medium for the most part to really make it work. And so we're beholden to Apple, Stitcher, and some other distributors at this point. And that's the concern that I have with podcasting.
I guess the goal itself is not to start up a podcast or do content marketing or a blog. It's just means to reach the other goals. And
that's right.
In that respect, there is a lot of companies not asking themselves why.
Well, by the way, just since you asked that question, that's the best way to end it. We're not creating content to create content. Just simply ask yourself why. That's the biggest issue that we see with companies out there, is that they say they're going to start a blog, a podcast, a print magazine, a digital magazine, a social media program, a Snapchat channel, whatever. They're going to do all these things, and they don't really ask themselves, why are they doing it? What impact are they trying to have? And why does this make a difference to customers at all in the first place?
And how are they going to measure it?
Before you start with anything, you want to start with, begin with the end in mind. And you want to say, well, how are we? Now, the hypothesis may be wrong. I mean, you're going to tweak that hypothesis as you go, but at least start out with one. And a lot of companies, that's why we always say write down that strategy and then share that with your team. And every time you get together and you do your content review, you need to be looking at that and saying, is this the right why? Is this the right hypothesis? Are we still measuring this correctly? Is this the way that we're going to do it? And questioning that every day. And if you don't have that strategy in front of your team every day, you might miss over that. And you start looking at the small things like, web traffic and other things. And then you're like, we didn't hit our goal. Well, because we're not looking at it every day. Make sure you look at it every day.
Very good. I'm going to leave you with that. I think that was the perfect end note to this call. I want to thank you again a million times for joining us as guest on Media Pulse. As Robert Rose would say, it's your story to tell. Tell it well, right?
I love that. Exactly. That's how he finishes every podcast. You got it.
Give him my best regards. I'm a huge fan of both of you.
Oh, thank you so much for all the support. And thanks for finally having me on. And whenever you have a hole in your agenda, you give me a call.